Hello, in this video we are going to talk about the all-giving tree. Let's get to it. If you're watching this video on Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving, and I wish you all have a wonderful and safe holiday. And I will be super grateful if you hit the like button down below and also subscribe. So let's go ahead and talk about our topic of the all-giving tree. And there's actually a lot of trees inside of programming, and there are so many different kinds of trees that we can go into. But the main trees that are really used a lot inside of the programming field is the tree data structure as well as the tree diagram. But today we are actually going to be talking about the tree diagram. And we'll probably do the tree data type in a whole nother video. Now, the main thing about the tree diagram is that it is a tool to help you plan out things and also help to see relationships within between your objects. Diagrams are a huge way for us to help plan things, and it will really help us in the long run of when we do build out our projects. And with these diagrams, it actually shows us a lot with what item or object has, and also relational data, and also things that each individual object has. And this really helps us in the planning field, and it also can help us visualize things that is pretty hard to visualize just in our head. So here are the main components with the individual tree diagrams. And there's a lot of different ways of how you can do tree diagrams, but in most of these cases you would have a root or a root element, and you would have different leaves or nodes, and you also have branches. And we'll talk about each of those components shortly. You can kind of think about a tree diagram as a tree, well, kind of upside down tree, because we're always going to be starting from the root and then going down and branching out from the root from there. So let's actually start at the starting point, which is the root. And with the root, you can consider it as the main or the super parent. This is something that all of the elements all stem off of, is the root itself. And this is where we are going to be starting when we do our tree diagrams. So all of your tree diagrams should have a root or even multiple roots if you are making a complex structure. Something else that a tree diagram has is that it has a lot of leaves or sometimes nodes. And the difference between leaves or nodes is just the different terminology, basically. But this is the actual object itself and what goes into the diagram and makes up the bulk of the diagram. And this is sometimes ordered within relationship. So you can kind of see these within the relationship itself, or you can actually use these nodes and leaves and also describe relationships too. And a lot of your tree diagrams will have a bunch of leaves or nodes. What I use the most is probably nodes. It's a lot more simpler to draw boxes, and it is described better if I use a node itself. And other data structures, especially with tree data structures, they also use nodes as well. So that could also help out with things too. Now, the other main thing about a tree diagram is the branches, or else you'll just have a bunch of leaves inside of this picture, right? But branches actually are really important within a tree diagram because it describes relationships and also shows connections between the nodes and the roots and all of the other things that are in the diagram itself. And there are different ways you can do branches. There's different ways to design things. So you can have a branch that signifies inheritance, or a branch that signifies a root, or a many relationship, or a one-to-one relationship, or a many-to-many relationship. There's a bunch of kinds of branches that you can use within the tree diagram. And this is one of the core features of a tree diagram, is the nodes and the branches, because it really shows the connections. Now, if you're just thinking about this, some of this items might be pretty hard to come up with. For example, it might be hard to come up with individual objects to be leaves or nodes. And the main thing about the leaves and nodes is that it should be the main objects of your program or what you're trying to do. These aren't really characteristics or fields or attributes, it's more of what those attributes belong to. For example, if I am thinking about probably like a gaming store. So with the gaming store, you have like prices, you have individual titles, you also have games and friends and a bunch of other things. Objects that you can pull from that example is probably a game object, and that would be a leaf or node. And within the game object, then you can have the price of the game, the title of the game. That could all be stemming off of the game itself. And maybe there's a collection of games, like it belongs to your library or your user library. That could be another example of objects, and also connections to the objects. So really think about what it is that you're trying to build or what it is that you're trying to work with, and try to come up with core objects and things that are stemming off of a main object itself. And that would be your leaves or nodes. Now, another hard thing about this is probably figuring out the relationship. Inside of the relationship itself, it really can get either really simple or really complicated. And this all go ahead and takes a lot of practice to see what kind of relationship there are and how each of them works. But the main thing is that when you are doing associations or relationships, they should make sense in English. Such as if going back to the game example, a title belongs to a game because it's a game title. A game doesn't belong to a title. That doesn't make sense, right? So we need to have it make sense, and that could also signify what relationship that it has. Or employee has many projects. Project only belongs to a single employee, so it should make sense in English. So that is a good rule of thumb for coming up with relationships between objects. Now, the last thing is probably one of the hardest things is to figure out what the root of the whole entire project is. And this could be multiple things. It could be one thing or it could be a multitude of things. It's mostly where the main core features kind of stem off of. You can think of it as a stem here where all the leaves and branches come off of. That is essentially what the root is everything builds off of that single object. And in some cases, the root object would be the user. The user creates games, the user creates posts, the user creates comments. The user would be the core or the root of the individual diagram within itself. And it's mostly you have to figure out the main features or the main items that you are trying to build or trying to work with. And if that has a sole main object that it stems off with, then that's most likely the root. So for this next couple of slides, I'm going to actually go into some examples because the best way for you to actually learn about tree diagrams is to actually take a look at them and also create them yourself. So here, mostly HTML documents and the DOM are actually inside of a tree structure. But inside of the tree structure itself, it actually is a little bit hard to kind of visualize ourselves. So we can actually draw it as a tree diagram. And you can see here that everything kind of stems off of the HTML main tag, the HTML tag. And that could be considered the root. And everything kind of stems off of the HTML tag, like the head and the body. And that could also stem off into more branches and more connections. And since the HTML with the head and the body, those are mostly going to be connected with some sort of a connection, right? So we can see that HTML has a head and it also has a body. And they all belong to the HTML within itself. So you can kind of tell the relationship or what it belongs to. Here you can see that this hello world belongs to this H1 and this world here belongs to the P tag. And you can see that hello doesn't belong to P or it doesn't belong to the head or directly to the body. It belongs to the H1. So you can kind of see better what the relationship is within this type of tree structure. And this is most cases how your programs will kind of stem off of and how it will look, and also how easy it is to create some tree diagrams. It doesn't have to be complex. Depending on where it is or what you're trying to do, you can get away with just having circles and lines as well as words. Those tools are actually really good tools for you to use as a tree diagram. And looking based on this example, I can actually can tell what it is that I'm looking at. I'm looking at an HTML page here, and I can know that there is a H1 of hello and a P tag of world, and it all is connected within the HTML tag, the whole entire document itself. So this is a really good visualization of how things are connected and how things are related to each other. Now let's actually go into another example, but this time we are dealing with objects. Let's think about any sort of social media that you use. So with the in social media, you'll probably have some sort of a user object. And with that user object, you have to be able to be logged in order for you to do anything within that social network. And the reason being for that is that it is a much more collaborative way for you to kind of do things inside of their application. And within any sort of social media network, there's probably some sort of a posting system. So that would stem off of a user. And with that, you can kind of tell the posts belong to a certain user. And that is why the relationship is a user has many posts, and then a post belongs to a user here. And that makes sense in English, because if I say post has many users and then user belongs to a post, that kind of does make sense, but then who's creating the post, right? Like you still need that main root object for that to happen. So that's why the user is the root here. And we can also stem off of that as well, is that inside a post, sometimes you would have the ability to have comments. And then for comments, you can have likes. And you can see that with comments and likes, those are all under posts. It doesn't belong in the profile because that is not the relational data or the connection that it is. The comments and likes actually are connected to just the post, not the profile. And the profile is just by itself. It only is related to the user. So this is another example of how you can use a tree diagram to kind of visualize and kind of plan out your relationship with your applications, especially if you are doing a social network application here. And we can go on and on with a bunch of examples, and we can go as simple or as complex as we can get. And to be honest, I can go and make a full hour video doing all of these different tree diagrams, but the way for you to learn it is actually to practice and to make your own tree diagrams. So practice does make perfect. It's like planting a seed and watching a tree grow. It's that the more you nurture it, the more you spend time with it, the bigger and better the tree is. It goes the same with your knowledge. And with tree diagrams, your first one is probably going to be pretty simple, or it's not going to work just as well. But as you draw and as you kind of come up with more tree diagrams, it will get better and better and better. So that is why practice does make perfect when you're learning tree diagrams. And the other thing is that tree diagrams can actually evolve into other types of diagrams, especially when you are planning things such as like a database or a project or even a use case of a user journey inside of an application. You can really utilize a tree diagram, and it could be very simple and very complicated. One example I have here is a much more detailed tree diagram inside of a database network. And this is more of a physical design, and there's a bunch of different types of designs, and they all have similar things of like a root and branches and nodes. It's just called something different, and it's just worked something different within this type of designing system. So here I have a department has many employees, and employees belong to the department. And then the employee has a many-to-many relationship between the projects. So that is connected with the works on there. So employee has many projects through works on, and projects has many employees through works on. So that is a many to many relationship. And you can see here what this design is a lot more detail. You can actually see what employee has. It has a first name, last name, employee number. Project has a project number, budget. So, and also their data type of integer and constraints and other information that could be relative to that design process. So again, this is all going off of that tree diagram itself, is that you can make it really dynamic and go really more detail with it. It just takes practice and to see what you're able to do. That is it for all this video. I hope you like the all giving tree and talking about the tree diagram. So that way you can use the tree diagram in your next project. If you like it, don't forget to hit the like button below and have an awesome Thanksgiving holiday. And I will see you in the next video. See ya.